Lindsey Vonn thinking of Eileen Gu after heartbreaking personal loss. Legendary U.S. Olympian Lindsey Vonn is thinking of Eileen Gu following her heartbreaking personal loss at the Winter Olympics. Gu, 22, won 3 medals at the 2026 Winter Olympics. Gu won a gold medal in the freestyle halfpipe and 2 silver medals. However, following her gold medal on Sunday, she announced a devastating personal loss. The iconic Chinese athlete, born in the U.S., announced her grandmother passed away. She was a steamship, Gu said through tears after the 2026 Games. This woman commanded life, took it by the reins, and turned it into whatever she wanted it to be. She added in an Instagram post, "Because I promised her I would be brave like her." Vonn is among those thinking of Gu following her heartbreaking personal loss on Monday morning. "Grandmas are so special. I'm so sorry," Vonn commented on Gu's Instagram post. Vonn is going through a tough time of her own. The legendary U.S. Olympian, 41, revealed on Monday that she nearly had her leg amputated following her devastating accident. "I'm finally out of the hospital." Light skin tone person raising both hands in celebration after almost 2 weeks of laying in a hospital bed almost completely immobile. "I'm finally well enough to move to a hotel. It's not home yet, but it's a huge step," she announced. "I hope I explained my injury well enough. I'm not a doctor, so if I don't explain something perfectly, please forgive me. When the injury happened, the situation was quite challenging in many ways, but in the end, the situation was brought back into control. Again, thank you Dr. Tom Hackett." Light skin tone person with folded hands, red heart hash. "Now I will focus on rehab and progressing from a wheelchair to crutches in a few weeks. It will take around a year for all of the bones to heal, and then I will decide if I want to take out all the metal or not, and then go back into surgery and finally fix my ACL. It will be a long road, but I'll get there. At least I'm out of the hospital." Light skin tone person raising both hands in celebration, light skin tone flexed biceps. Even now, long after the medals had been polished and placed behind glass, long after the roar of race day crowds had faded into memory, she still found herself drawn to the hush of snow-covered peaks. The air was thinner there, sharp, honest. It did not allow pretense. It did not soften grief. The loss had come quietly, though nothing about it felt quiet inside her. It moved like an avalanche beneath her ribs, sudden, crushing, impossible to outrun. In the days that followed, the world seemed divided into 2 versions of itself. The one that continued spinning, oblivious, and the one that had stopped entirely. She woke before dawn, as she always had during her racing years. Old habits were stubborn. The sky was still ink dark when she wrapped herself in a heavy coat and stepped outside. Snow fell in delicate spirals, landing on her eyelashes, melting into salt water she refused to call tears. Grief, she was learning, had the texture of fresh powder, deceptively soft but capable of swallowing you whole. And strangely, in those hours before the sun rose, her mind wandered to someone she had never quite stopped thinking about: Eileen. It wasn't the medals that connected them. Not really. It wasn't the podiums, the flags, the bright lights, or the cameras capturing triumphant smiles. It was the shared language of risk, the way both of them had stood at the top of something impossibly steep, knowing that one miscalculation could cost everything. Lindsey remembered watching Eileen the first time she truly paid attention, not as a spectator, but as someone who understood the invisible mathematics of courage. There had been a fearlessness in her, yes, but also something more intricate. A joy, as though the mountain was not an adversary to conquer but a partner in conversation. That joy haunted Lindsey now. Grief had stolen her sense of conversation with the world. Everything felt one-sided. She spoke into silence. She moved through rooms that echoed with absence. The heartbreak was personal, intimate, the kind that rearranged your inner architecture without asking permission. She found herself wondering how Eileen would face such a loss. Not because she doubted her strength. Quite the opposite. Strength, Lindsey knew, was rarely the absence of pain. It was the decision to move anyway. The morning light began to bleed into the sky, pale and hesitant. Lindsey climbed into her car and drove toward the mountain road she had known for decades. The curves were familiar, almost sacred. She could drive them with her eyes closed, though she never would. Precision had always been her discipline. She parked near a quiet trail and stepped out into the cold. The snow beneath her boots crunched with a sound she had missed, clean and decisive. Each step left a mark, proof of presence, proof that she was still here. It was strange how loss could make survival feel like an achievement. As she climbed higher, breath clouding in front of her, she remembered a race years ago when she had fallen hard. The crash had been brutal. Body tumbling, skis snapping loose, the world a blur of white and sky. She had lain there for a moment, stunned, listening to the thud of her own heartbeat inside her helmet. She had gotten up, not because it didn't hurt. It had hurt everywhere, but because she knew something fundamental. The mountain did not remember your fall. It only waited for your next descent. Was grief the same? The thought unsettled her. She did not want the world to forget. She did not want this loss to dissolve into the background noise of time. And yet, she knew she would have to descend again, into life, into motion, into days that required her participation. Eileen would understand that, she thought. Young as she was, Eileen carried an unusual balance, ambition braided with reflection. Lindsey had seen interviews where she spoke about identity, about navigating multiple worlds, about expectations that came from every direction. It was a different kind of steep slope, one Lindsey had not faced in quite the same way. But the pressure? That was universal. Pressure could carve you into brilliance, or fracture you. Lindsey paused near a ridge where the view opened wide. The valley below was still half asleep, fog resting low like a secret. The mountains stood silent, ancient witnesses to countless human dramas, victories, heartbreaks, quiet prayers. She closed her eyes and let the cold wind press against her face. If she could speak to Eileen in this moment, not as a legend to a rising star, not as an icon to a prodigy, but simply as one woman to another, what would she say? She would say, "The world will celebrate your strength. It will replay your triumphs. It will freeze-frame your smiles, but it will not always know the cost." She would say, "When loss comes, and it will, in some form, because it comes for all of us, do not measure your worth by how quickly you return to brilliance." She would say, "Let yourself feel the fall." The snow began again, gentle at first. Lindsey opened her eyes and watched the flakes gather on her sleeves. They reminded her of confetti, but softer, less demanding. In the early years of her career, she had believed resilience meant impermeability. She thought champions were carved from something denser than ordinary flesh, that they did not break, they bent and snapped back into shape. But she had broken, more than once. Injuries had fractured bone. Criticism had bruised ego. Personal heartbreak had hollowed spaces inside her that no trophy could fill.